A minor is a person who has not reached the age of majority. The law is always considerate about the minors. They don't want them to get into any sort of legal tangles. Now, minor cannot hold buy or any shares of a company, but a major who is his minor's guardian can do it on his behalf. Good morning and welcome to the second session in the commercial law, where we are going to talk about minors agreement. Now, in the unit 2 session 2, we are going to first talk about who is a minor and why is the importance of minor being spoken about in terms of the contracts. Now, a minor is a person who has not reached the age of majority. That means he has still not reached the age of 18 as stated by the law, and hence he is considered to be a minor. So this word is very, very important for all of us. Now, which section? Section 3 of the Indian Majority Act in 1875 states that a person who has not reached the age of 18 is a minor. The exception is that if the child's guardian is appointed by the court as a lawful guardian, then the age majority is 21 years. Now, this is a very, very important phenomenon factor that we have to understand. So, in case, suppose the minor does not have parents and there is a lawful guardian who is appointed by the court of law stating that you please take care of the child, then automatically the age of majority, the age at which the particular child attains an adulthood, is 21 years. So after 21 years, the child can now take out his property, his activities, and he can start functioning independently. But until then, he is under the care of the guardian. In a normal circumstances, if the person has not attained the age of 18, then he is considered to be a minor. Going further, now, what are the minors agreement and their nature? Many a times what we tend to do is that we forget this age factor. Why? Because that does not flash the mind of a person at any given point of time. We only believe that somehow the agreement has to be reached. We really do not worry about the age and the date of birth, and we simply sign ahead the contract. But then what does the court say is that a minor's agreement, when a minor enters into an agreement which is void ab initio according to the law. So, moment a minor enters, we do not even want to further think about it. We do not even want to further argue on it. A minor entering into a contract itself is considered to be void. So, by any chance, if any party try to go ahead and sign up on the document stating that this is the agreement factor, I have signed on it, and he is supposed to be a minor, then automatically it is considered to be void. Now, the section 10 of the Indian Contract Act says that parties entering into the contract must be competent to contract. This is what we spoke in the previous sessions also, the competency to contract. Now, under that factor, the section 11 of the Indian Contract also says that a minor below 18 years of age is therefore not competent to enter into the contract. Now, that is very, very important. Section 10 talks about competency of the contract, whether you are competent to get into a contractual capacity. But section 11 talks about the factor saying that they are not competent. But when you are finding that the person is not above 18 years, he is still a minor, that means he is not competent to enter into the contract. Followed by what are the minors agreement and their nature. In England, under the Infants Relief Act of 1874, the following situations are absolutely void. Now, why do we go back to UK or to England is that this is because we want to understand where the law originated altogether. So, what we try to say here is that repaying the lent money, goods that are supplied, accounts stated, these things are supposed to be absolutely void. So, you cannot take back the money, you cannot, give loans to minor and then recover money from them, or if you are supplying any goods, you cannot go back and ask them the accounts or any kind of factor. Now, a controversy pertaining to section 10 and 11 was started during the early years of 1900s. The controversy being if minor's agreement was void or was it voidable at the minor's inconvenience. So in the year 1900s, the early 19s, what happened is that there was a controversy, there was an argument stating whether the minor's contract itself is void or whether the minor has got the permission to take forward at his discretion and make it voidable in nature. Now, moving further, the effects of a minor's agreement. Minor's agreement, as stated, is void, so both the parties involved in the contract are obligated to perform. Therefore, they are not obligated to perform. So therefore, all the effects of this agreement work independently of the contract. So at any point of time, considering the factor that a minor has got into this picture of signing up the contract and people are taking it into the account altogether, this will not be considered a contract at all. So they have to work independently. Now you cannot say that, sir, a minor had signed the contract, so he has to work. Why? Because the court says very, very clearly that the minor, first of all, doesn't come into picture. So he will not be a part of the contractual agreement. So why this hold good? Because let us go with a very simple common example for these days. There are many software apps which ask you this question clearly: are you 18 years above? Now, by mistake or by oversight or by any kind of factors, you just try to tell a lie by signing it saying that you are above 18 and then it was found that you are below 18, then automatically the entire contract, the entire license agreement becomes invalid. That is why people are very, very cautious about asking today what is the age factor. Because even if I have to employ somebody in the organization, he should be an adult. I cannot employ a person at the age of 14, 15 because that's a different agreement altogether. You cannot employ a 14 years or a 15 years and ask him to start working under the same capacity of an adult. So what we try to do is that we try to tell very clearly what are all the age factors under which you are selected, under which you become eligible to be a part of this entire scenario. So that is very, very important for all of us to understand. Moving further, the effects of the minor agreement. That's very, very important. Why? Because following are the effects of the minor's agreement. No estoppel against the minor. A minor who enters into the contract under the false pretense and claims to be a major, there will be no estoppel against him, and he legally does not need to prove his age in front of the court. That means there is absolutely no restriction that is needed here. This is very, very important for all of us to understand. Why this is important? Now let's try to understand the significance very, very clearly here. A minor who enters into the contract under the false pretense and claims to be a major, there will be no estoppel, there will be no charges against him, and he legally does not need to prove his age in front of the court. So there's no legality involved at all. I tried to prove myself that I was a major and I got into a false pretense altogether. court still protects, saying that you don't have to prove your age factor. You are no more considered to be competent to be a part of the contract. The reason behind it is to protect the minor from the liability. That's a very, very important factor that we need to know. So the law is always considerate about the minors. They don't want them to get into any sort of legal tangles. They do not want them to get into any sort of problem. So that is why the law says very clearly, no problem. We are still giving you a chance. You don't have to prove yourself to be of an age, and we are allowing you to go away from the contract. So that is why I always say that you don't have to be a part of the contract. You can just give away from the contract altogether. So that is very, very important for all of us to understand here. Followed by, for example, if A, who is a minor, pretends to be a major, enters into a contract to sell his father's car to make money for his PlayStation with B. So there is a person called A who is a minor. Because he wants to buy a video game PlayStation, he decides to sell his father's car by pretending that he is a major to a person whose name is B, who is unaware of the fact. Then A is a minor and locks the deal. Later, A's father finds out about the contract. B angrily goes to the court. He is not going to the court in a happy mood. He is going with all anger, asks for the compensation from the court. Now the court says that A, being a minor, has got no obligation to pay back. It was actually B's responsibility to find out whether A was a minor during the time of contract. Was he a minor or major? The B should have been aware about it. B cannot go back and say to the court that, sir, I did not know, he only promised. That will never be taken into position. So the court will again go and try to support the minor by saying the fact that he is a minor. So you have to be careful while signing up a contract with a minor. The minor shall not be legally punished for any kind of act altogether. Now, the next thing is that a minor is incapable to give his consent to either enter into a contract. Therefore, a contract without consent, no legal action can be taken whatsoever, as the contract is void. Now, this is very, very important. Consent. The word consent itself is a very, very important term as we are speaking about it. Why consent is important? What is the significance of consent altogether when we talk about it? Whenever you are doing some work or you agree to do some work for somebody, there should be a consent. There should be an acceptance wholeheartedly from your side. So you need to agree. You need to tell him very clearly that, yes, sir, I agree hereby to take the consent from your side. I will do it on your behalf. I will take this particular factor and I will work it out for you. Now what happens here is that if you are not taking the consent, if you are not understanding, taking that undertaking from your side, and you just want to go further and just solve the issue altogether, then what happens is leads to a problem. This leads to a scenario, this leads to a situation where that particular person does not even understand. Why? Because he didn't have the contractual capacity altogether. So that is why we try to say that in a minor case, he does not have the permission. He is incapable of giving a consent, because the law says, the court of law says that minors are those people who do not have the capacity to make a decision mentally. So being that condition, the person cannot automatically get into making contracts. So once, if a consent is not given for a contract, then automatically the contract becomes void. You cannot force upon it. You cannot say that there is a contract signed so that I can take a legal action against you if you are not signing or if you are not performing. So that's why what we say here is that this contract is highly important. You need to understand what it is altogether. Now, the next thing is that an infant who falsifies his age to enter into a contract is not liable to pay any compensation or damages during the breach of contract, and therefore a minor is not liable for anything in the case. And this is very, very important for all of us. So that's why even while taking the license, a driving license for a car, it is important whether you are a minor or you are a major. Why? Because if you are a minor and still you want to apply for a license, under the government of India, we say that minor's license will be only given as learner's license. You will not be given a full-fledged driving license altogether. That is very, very important for you to understand. So, if a minor does a mistake, the minor cannot be charged in the court of law stating that he has done a mistake and he has to be punished for it. This cannot be understood at all. So that is why we have to understand this factor clearly before doing that particular case. So before you start understanding this factor that he has falsified, he has entered into an agreement which he is not supposed to, in that case, again, let us be sure that the court is definitely going to support the minor and not the other party. So in any form and format, the minor is going to be held beneficial. Moving forward, there is no such thing called as ratification of minor's contract. Now, this is very, very important. Sir, can I ratify the contract? Okay, because I also want to become beneficiary. Why every time the minor alone should get beneficiary? Why not me? So can I go ahead and ratify the contract so that even I also get a benefit out of it? The answer is no. So if a person during the entire time of the contract is a minor and then the contract is automatically void. Now what happens? The minor, after becoming a major, cannot rectify the previous contract. That is void. That is gone. That contract cannot be again brought back into the picture and spoken about it. Why? Because we have clearly told at that juncture that that entire contract is taken out of picture. So this contract is not going to be considered anymore. This is very, very important for all of us to know. So can I go back and ratify the contract? The previous contract is completely not valid. It is gone. Now, after attaining the age of 18, if that person is going to again get into contract, that will be considered a full-fledged contract because you are not a minor anymore, you are an adult. So now you have to form a new contract altogether. The next thing here is that it cannot be rectified as it is believed that the minor does not have the mental capacity to enter into the contract. This word is very, very important. So he will not have the authority to rectify it. So at any given point of time, a minor is considered to be incapable of decision making. This word decision making is very important for all of us to learn. Why the court says no to a minor? Because he is not in a capacity to make decisions on his own. That is why the government says very clearly only after attaining the age of 18 you are eligible to vote. So you don't have the decision making capacity. You are not considered to be sound enough to make a decision. So in that condition, automatically the minor has to step out of the contract. He cannot be considered to be a person who is eligible to make a valid contract. Now, moving further, in addition to this, if the parties who have entered into a contract show interest, can make a new contract, the condition that is consideration in this new contract will be a fresh one, as the previous one consideration cannot be taken into factor. So as I have told, now if they want to make a contract, that means they have to form a new fresh contract with the new set of rules and regulation, a new consideration altogether, stating that this is a fresh contract, this is what we have gone through, these are the new terms and conditions, so please accept the contract. So that is how this entire contract will be considered altogether. So that is how they will be looking into the contractual factor or the document altogether. For example, Mr. X, a minor, enters into a contract with Mr. Y on the 20th October 2019, which is very much acceptable, to sell his car and to him for a certain amount. This contract being void is illegal, but they wish that they can enter into the contract as soon as Mr. X turns 18 with the consideration. Now, look at the condition here. Mr. X is a minor. He enters into a contract on Y, saying that on 20th October 2019, because at that time the contract is void, being a minor, sells his car for him for a certain amount. This contract is void because it's illegal. But if they wish, saying that they want to enter, they can form a new contract once X reaches the age of 18. So again, after X reaching the age of 18, can form a new contract and sell his car for whatever rate that's available on the market. So initially what we try to say is that any form of contracts with the minor will be considered to be void. You cannot proceed at any given point of time. Moving further, the doctrine of restitution, which is very, very important. If a minor represents his age and claims to be an adult and enters into a contract, he can be asked to restore the goods in his possession that were a part of the contract, as long as they are in his possession, not sold or given to anybody, and it is not consideration for money factor. If asked to do so otherwise, it would mean that enforcing a void contract. Again, it comes back to the minor's agreement. Now, let's first try to understand in a very simple manner what is it and what do you mean by this restitution. Now, what happens here is that, as usual, let's say a minor goes forward and he tries to pretend himself as a major and tries to get into a contract. At the end of the day, you come to know that he is a minor and he shouldn't have got into the contract. Now, you have supplied goods to him. Now, what you can do is that you can ask the minor to give back the goods for no money. Money is not a consideration here at all. Please return back the goods to me, because you are not even eligible to be a part of the contract. So, I cannot go on with the trade regulation with you. All I can ask you is that return back the goods which you took from me. So that's why we say that the goods which are in his possession, the possession of the minor, he should return it back. But in case if the minor was smart enough that he took the goods and sold it to somebody and made money out of it, then we cannot do much about it. We have to leave it there. Why? Because the contract itself is illegal. So what we say here is that in case if the minor is still in possession of the goods, then you can go forward and claim that goods back. The next thing is doctrine of restitution, where Mr. X, a minor, enters into a contract. Mr. Y hires a car for 3 days. During those 3 days, he sells the car. Now, Mr. Y, after finding that, files about the case in the court of law, asking him for compensation. Now, what is going to happen here? As seen, Mr. X no more has the possession of the car. What he did, he sold the car which he was holding it for the last 3 days, and therefore he will not be asked to compensate. So minor, now he is having an advantage because he is minor in age. What he has to do, he will not be asked to give the compensation back to Y. So Mr. X is still in an advantageous position because of his age factor. But in case he still had the car under his possession and refused to give it back, the doctrine of restitution would not have applied. Suppose we found out that he did not sell his car. He still holds the car of Mr. Y. That time, doctrine of restitution will not be applied. He has to return back the car to Mr. Y. Followed by, in addition to these 4 main effects, there are some side effects, there are some other effects also. The parents of a minor will not be held liable if the minor falsifies his age, but they will be held liable if the minor was entering into the contract on his parents' accord. Now, that is another factor that we have to understand. The parents of the minor will not be held by the court of law immediately. Because I made a mistake by showing that I am 18 plus, my parents are not going to be questioned by the court of law. They will not hold them responsible. That is not their mistake. But if I would have gone ahead with the factor that minor has gone ahead and signed on the parent's accord with the parent's capacity or with the parent's knowledge, and he has signed on behalf, and all those factors have happened, then the court will hold the parents, because at that time the parents are responsible enough to answer to the court saying that how did they even allow the minor to do these kind of activities. So minor, on one side you see that there's a lot of beneficiary factors that are given by the court of law, but the other side you also need to understand this factor clearly, that there are even loopholes, there are even sections which can go ahead and hold the minor liable if it is found to be otherwise. Now, the other thing is that a minor cannot declare bankruptcy, which means to say that minor at any point doesn't even have to first of all compensate or come into the picture of money. So there's no question of bankruptcy coming into picture. Now, minor cannot hold, buy or any shares of a company, but a major who is his minor's guardian can do it on his behalf. Now, if I am a minor, but I know very much about the stock exchange, I have studied about the stock market, with the help of a guardian, he can buy shares on behalf of me. So I can just give him the ideas. I can give him the tips saying that please buy this company share or please buy the other company share. But here, what is very, very important for all of us to understand and acknowledge is that a minor cannot directly get into any form of transactions. He cannot get into any form of buy or sell or any trade related activities. What he can do is that using the help of a guardian, he can get into the buying or trading activity altogether. So it is the guardian's responsibility that he understands that yes, the minor is interested in buying and selling. So yes, the guardian can come forward, help the minor that yes, this has been done, we can take it forward. The next thing, when we come to the conclusion of this particular session, is that according to section 11 of the Indian contract, a minor cannot enter into a contract after a productive debate. It was concluded that minor's agreement is void ab initio and not voidable. First of all, the agreement itself is void, so let us not even take the topic to a voidable scenario at any point. After a great amount of debate and discussion, we came to this conclusion saying that minor's agreement will not be considered at all. It will automatically come to an end saying that there is no point in taking the agreement forward. It has many effects, but they are independent to agreement, as void contract cannot have consequences. Independently, when you look into the case, yes, there are many effects, there are many factors to be talked, to be disclosed, to be understood altogether, but they will not have any consequence on the contract because the contract itself has become void. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the information that has been shared through this particular session will be of a great benefit and resource to you. In the upcoming session, we will be talking more about the contract law. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.